My parents didn't pick me up from my own graduation, because my cousin deserved the spotlight more. And when I asked why, my mom whispered, "Because you're not like the rest of us." They left me outside in my cap and gown. The next morning, they begged me to come home. "Your uncle's furious at us." "I just don't get it, Mom. Why couldn't you at least come after? Why did I have to stand there by myself?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Long enough for my heart to drop before she whispered back, "Because you're not like the rest of us." I had to pull the phone away from my ear and stare at it. As if maybe I'd imagined what I just heard. But I hadn't. She hung up before I could say anything else. Graduation has always been a goalpost in my life. I wasn't a troublemaker. I wasn't a star student either, at least not in the way my cousin Jaya was. I just kept my head down, studied hard, made it through the mess of adolescence without causing waves. I guess that was my biggest sin. I didn't perform for the family like they wanted me to. I wasn't shiny. I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa. It's not a big city, not a small town either. But it has that energy, where people care deeply about their lawns, their church attendance, and what the neighbors might think. My parents, Carl and Lorraine, were the kind of people who measured success in photos on the mantle. You know, post smiles at holidays, report cards on the fridge. Everything had to look right. Jaya, my cousin on my mom's side, was the golden child of our extended family. National piano competitions, statewide swim medals, articles in the local newspaper. She was on track for an Ivy League school. She was everything my parents wanted in a child, and she wasn't even theirs. My mom would always say, "We just love how grounded Jaya is," or, "She has such poise." I heard it enough that I could repeat it with her inflection. Never mind that I was getting into the University of Chicago with a full academic scholarship. That wasn't charming or graceful enough, I guess. My graduation fell on the same day as one of Jaya's piano recitals. It wasn't even nationals or anything, just a regional showcase in Cedar Rapids. I told my parents weeks in advance, and they promised they'd be at my ceremony. Even if they had to leave early, even if they had to split up. "We'll be there." "Of course we'll be there," my mom said with that polite smile she wore like a mask. I should have known better. The gymnasium was packed. Roosevelt High had over 300 seniors that year, and all of them had families waving from the stands, yelling when their names were called. Flashbulbs. Balloons. Homemade signs. Happy tears. It was chaotic and beautiful. And then there was me. I sat there in my black gown with my honor cords, clutching the small plastic diploma holder they give you before you get the real thing in the mail. I kept scanning the crowd. Looking for my dad's bright blue shirt. For my mom's tall frame. For their crap hand-painted Gomara sign they claimed they were making. Nothing. Even when the ceremony ended and the crowd flooded the floor, I waited. And waited. It wasn't until nearly everyone had left that I called. "You already know what she said. Because you're not like the rest of us." What the hell does that even mean? I walked to the edge of the parking lot and just stood there. The buses were gone. The teachers had packed up. A few janitors were sweeping up confetti near the entrance. It was almost funny, the way it felt like a movie ending, but it was just me, in a cap and gown, holding my phone like in a holy. I didn't cry. I think I was too stunned. Or too practiced at pretending things didn't hurt. I started walking. I ended up at Alex's house, my closest friend since 9th grade. She lived about 3 miles from the school. Her parents answered the door before I could even knock. I think they knew something was wrong before I said anything. Alex handed me a paper plate with some leftover cake from her little brother's birthday party. I sat on their couch, ate in silence, still in my gown. It was ridiculous. The whole thing felt like a dream or a joke, but it was real. Her mom said softly, "You can stay as long as you need." I didn't even respond. I just nodded. The next morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating nonstop. 15 missed calls from mom. 8 from dad. A string of texts, call us. Please come home. We didn't mean to hurt you. Your uncle's furious at us. That last one made me sit up. Uncle Bren. Jaya's dad. He wasn't just mad. He was furious? I ignored the calls all day. When my dad finally got through, he tried to sound calm, like nothing had happened. Like we could just reset. We'd like to talk. Come home, we'll explain everything. There's nothing to explain, I said, flatly. You don't understand. No, I understand perfectly. You picked her. Like you always do. He exhaled sharply, but didn't argue. That said more than anything else could have. Later that night, I got a call from Uncle Bren. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Mara. I just heard what happened. I can't believe it. I'm disgusted, honestly. I was quiet. I wasn't sure how to respond to someone actually being angry on my behalf. She didn't even want them there, he added. Jaya thought they were with you. They weren't, I said. He paused. You didn't deserve that. I know. That's when the tears finally came. Not sobbing. Just quiet, tired crying. Like my body had finally stopped holding the dam up. My absence caused more of a ripple than I expected. My parents were confronted by other relatives. Apparently, at some family barbecue the day after the graduation, Uncle Bren called them out in front of everyone. You chose attention over your own daughter, he told them. What does that say about you? They tried to spin it, of course. I told them it was okay if they went to Jaya's event. That it was a misunderstanding. But no one believed it. Jaya was the only one who actually came to see me. She showed up at Alex's house a week later. Her car was parked awkwardly on the lawn, like she'd driven straight there the moment she found out where I was. She handed me a small framed photo. It was from 2 years ago, when I gave a speech for a student leadership conference. I didn't even know anyone had taken a picture. You looked so confident, she said. I kept it because I wanted to be like that. Like you. I didn't know what to say. We talked for hours. She told me how she was sick of being the center of everything, how it felt like pressure, not love. She said she was sorry for what happened. That it wasn't her fault, but she still felt responsible. I didn't blame her. I never did. I didn't go home that summer. While most of my classmates were celebrating, prepping for college, or going on family vacations, I picked up shifts at a used bookstore a few blocks from Alex's place. The owner, Mrs. Stanwyck, was a retired English teacher with a habit of quoting Jane Austen anytime she disagreed with someone. She didn't ask why I needed work, and I didn't offer. I think she saw something in me, a kind of weight I didn't talk about, but couldn't hide either. My parents tried to reach out again, texts, emails, even a letter in the mail. I read them, but I didn't respond. Everything they said felt like damage control, not remorse. We were trying to support the whole family. We didn't realize how much it would hurt you. It wasn't about choosing sides. But it was. It always has been. Every family dinner, every photo op, every birthday where Jaya's achievements overshadowed whatever I had going on. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. Alex's mom started referring to me as her summer daughter. She bought me a toothbrush for their upstairs bathroom, made sure my favorite cereal was stocked. She said once, "You don't have to be grateful, Mara. You're just a person who deserves to be cared for." That stuck with me more than anything my real parents had ever said. Late July, Jaya and I met up again. This time at Gray's Lake, where we used to have family picnics when we were little. It was warm, humid, the air thick with the scent of lake water and barbecue smoke from nearby grills. She brought iced coffees and a small manila envelope. "I want to show you something," she said, sitting beside me on the bench near the shore. Inside the envelope were copies of old family photos. But not the glossy, carefully posed ones. These were candid, ones I barely remembered. One was from the summer I was 11, holding a frog I'd found in the backyard. Jaya was beside me, laughing. Another was from my 8th grade science fair. I'd built a basic solar desalination system and won second place. There I was, beaming next to my little model setup. My parents weren't in the photo. I remembered then, Jaya had taken it. She was the only family member who showed up. I went through my mom's boxes, she said. Found these and thought. You should have them. I ran my fingers over the edges. The paper was worn, a little curled from being stored so long. But it felt more real than anything I had at home. I don't get it, I finally said. Why did they always treat me like I didn't matter? Jaya looked out at the lake for a long moment. I think because you didn't play the part. You didn't give them what they needed to feel like good parents. You didn't make it easy for them to pretend everything was perfect. I hadn't thought of it like that before. But she was right. They needed a mirror. I was a window. By the time August rolled around, my dad sent one final email. It was longer than the others, wordy, like he'd tried to sound profound. There was a line in there that read, "We know we've hurt you. We were trying to do right by everyone, but we failed you." It wasn't an apology, really. But it was the closest they'd ever come to admitting fault. Still, I didn't reply. I packed my things 2 weeks before my move to Chicago. I didn't ask for help, didn't invite anyone to see me off. I rented a U-Haul and asked Alex to ride with me. She played DJ, blasting old songs from high school that we used to sing in her bedroom when we were supposed to be studying. Somewhere on I-88, just outside Iowa City, she said, "Are you sure you're okay doing this on your own?" I looked out the window. The fields rolled by, endless and familiar and already fading into the past. "I'm not sure about anything," I said. "But I think it's time." College felt like exhaling for the first time in years. I didn't tell anyone there about what had happened over the summer, not right away. I just let myself exist. I decorated my dorm with secondhand posters and those old photos Jaya gave me. I got a part-time job shelving books at the university library. I walked everywhere. I made friends slowly, in that quiet, careful way people who've been burned tend to do. It wasn't until a few months in that I started writing about it. I took a creative nonfiction workshop as an elective. Our first assignment was to write a personal narrative. I sat in the campus cafe until 2 a.m. that night, typing and deleting, typing again. It wasn't polished. It didn't follow any fancy literary structure. It just told the truth. My professor pulled me aside after reading it. "This," she said, tapping the printed pages with her red pen. "This is something." She encouraged me to submit it to a small Midwestern literary journal. I did, half out of politeness. When it got accepted, I almost didn't believe it. But there it was, a few months later, in print, with my name at the top. I mailed a copy to my parents. No note. Just the article, folded neatly in an envelope. A week later, I got a letter back. My mom's handwriting was shaky, and the paper was creased like it had been folded and unfolded a dozen times. "Mara, I read it." I cried. "I don't know what else to say, but I'm sorry. I wish I had seen you better. I wish I hadn't let our idea of family blind me to my own daughter. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Love, Mom." I folded the letter and put it away in a drawer. I wasn't ready to respond. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt real. Documented. Like even if they didn't see me, the world finally did. I didn't show the letter to anyone for weeks. Not because I was trying to hide it, but because I didn't know what to do with it. It felt like a relic from another version of my life, one I had quietly packed into a box when I left Des Moines. Even rereading it made my stomach tighten. There was nothing dramatic in the words, nothing cruel. Just the soft scrape of regret from someone who never expected to be held accountable. Alex visited me in Chicago that fall. She was touring schools but mostly just wanted to see where I'd ended up. We sat by the lake near campus, watching the wind tug leaves off trees, and I finally told her about the letter. She didn't ask to read it. She just nodded and said, "Are you going to write back?" "I don't know. Do you want to?" I paused. Part of me does. But I'm scared she just feels guilty. And guilt isn't the same as love. Alex was quiet for a moment. It's not. But sometimes guilt is the closest thing they'll ever get to understanding what they did. That hit harder than I expected. Thanksgiving approached, and for the first time in my life, I had no obligation to go home. No plans, no baked-in traditions I had to pretend to enjoy. A few people in my dorm went home early. Others had Friendsgiving potlucks. I stayed behind, thinking I'd just order takeout and watch old movies by myself. But then Jaya called. "Dad and I are driving up to see some family friends in Evanston." I thought maybe we could swing by. Just us. No pressure. I hesitated. She waited. "Yeah," I said finally. "Okay." They showed up the next day, Jaya with a homemade pie she insisted she baked herself, and Uncle Bren holding a bag of groceries. "You need real food," he said as he came in. "College students live off fumes and caffeine." I smiled more than I had in weeks. We cooked together in the tiny dorm kitchen. It was chaotic, no counter space, borrowed pans, and smoke from the oven setting off the hallway alarm. But it felt warm. Not forced. Just easy. We ate on the floor of my dorm room. Jaya curled up on my beanbag chair. Uncle Bren sat cross-legged, knees cracking audibly when he moved. "Your piece was amazing," he said after a while, referring to the essay. I knew it would hurt them. But it needed to. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone," I said. "I know. That's why it landed." There was a pause. "She's really trying," he added gently. "Your mom, I mean. She's been quieter these days. Reflective. I think she's realizing the cost of all the little things she didn't think mattered." I didn't say anything right away. The cost, I thought, wasn't little at all. Winter in Chicago was cruel. Sharp winds off the lake, early darkness, layers of snow that iced over the sidewalks. But I was thriving in a strange way. The cold made me feel alive, like I was shedding the last of who I used to be. I dove into my studies, picked up another writing class, and submitted more pieces to small publications. Some were about growing up. Others were fiction, loosely based on real things, conversations, moments, fragments of memory that wouldn't let go. One story, about a girl standing outside her graduation alone, went semi-viral online. It wasn't titled after me, but people guessed. I got messages from strangers, some kind, others cruel. But the kind ones stuck with me. So many people wrote to say they saw themselves in the story. One message stood out: "My parents never showed up either." I thought I was the only one. There's something deeply human about being seen in someone else's pain. Like the moment you name it, it loses some of its power. I didn't hear from my parents again for a few months. Then, around February, I got an email from my dad. Just one sentence: "We've started therapy." I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I didn't expect it. I didn't expect movement. Spring thawed the city slowly. Grass peeked through slush. The breeze stopped biting. Students lingered outside buildings, chatting instead of rushing from class to class. I was walking back from a late seminar when my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail. From my mom. Her voice was soft, raw in a way I'd never heard. "Hi honey. I don't expect you to call back. I just wanted to tell you that I've been reading the things you've published. Everyone. And I'm sorry." Not in the casual, flippant way I used to say it. But really. I am. I'm sorry I didn't see you sooner. I'm sorry I didn't protect you from the way we kept pushing you aside. And I'm sorry I only realized it when everyone else started telling me I'd failed you. You didn't deserve to feel forgotten. I'll keep trying to do better. Even if you never speak to us again. I saved the voicemail. I didn't reply. Not yet. But I listened to it more than once. I saw Jaya again in early May. She was in town for a music workshop and invited me to grab dinner. We sat on a rooftop patio overlooking the city skyline. The sun was setting, casting everything in soft gold. She sipped her drink and asked, "Are you okay?" It took me a minute to answer. Then, honestly, I think I'm starting to be. She smiled. You're different than you were last year. Lighter. Sometimes I still get angry, I admitted. You're allowed to. What they did, what they kept doing, wasn't small. We talked for hours that night. About old family stories, about what healing looked like when the people who hurt you were still alive. Still around. Still capable of hurting you again. She told me that therapy had shifted her too. That she'd started saying no to things. Started asking herself what she wanted, not just what would make her the easiest to love. I nodded. It's weird, isn't it? How we were both trying so hard to survive in the same house in opposite ways. Jaya raised her glass. To survive. I clinked mine against hers. To outgrow. That summer, I went back to Des Moines for the first time in nearly a year. It wasn't planned. I didn't make a dramatic announcement or even tell my parents I was coming. I was heading to a writers' conference in Kansas City, and the bus route passed right through my hometown. On impulse, I decided to get off and spend a couple of nights there. Just to see how it felt. Alex's family still lived in the same house, and when I texted her mom asking if I could crash, her reply came almost instantly. Of course, sweetheart. Your bed's always here. When I got off the bus, the air smelled like cut grass and exhaust, exactly like it always had. My old neighborhood looked unchanged. Same cracked sidewalks. Same houses with manicured lawns. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a place I used to live in a different life. Alex was away at college herself now, so it was just me and her parents. Her mom made chicken casserole that first night, and her dad asked about Chicago like I was a traveler returning from war. They didn't press for details. Just gave me space to exist, to breathe. On the second day, I walked past my childhood home. I don't know what I was expecting, maybe to feel a surge of emotion or a wave of bitterness. But mostly, I felt nothing. The shutters were a new color. The lawn was neater than I remembered. It didn't feel like a place that belonged to me anymore. Just a house. Then the front door opened. It was my mother. She froze when she saw me. Her hands were full, car keys and a paper bag, like she was heading to the store. We stared at each other for a moment across the distance. She didn't call out my name. She didn't rush down the steps. She just looked at me like she wasn't sure if I was real. I gave her a small nod. Just enough to acknowledge her. She looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. Instead, she opened the car door, sat down, and drove away. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant either. It was just surreal. Later that afternoon, I visited Roosevelt High. The school secretary still remembered me, which felt bizarre and comforting all at once. She said I could walk the halls if I wanted, school was out for summer, and the place was quiet. I passed by my old locker. The classrooms where I pulled all-nighters before final exams. The gym where I had waited for them in my cap and gown, trying not to cry in front of the other kids' parents. The memory hit like a wave but didn't drown me. I took a seat on the bleachers and just sat. For a long time. A janitor came by eventually and gave me a curious look. I told him I was visiting. He nodded, like he saw that sort of thing a lot, people returning to the places they once tried so hard to escape. Before I left town, I stopped by my uncle's house. I hadn't planned to. But when Jaya found out I was in Des Moines, she begged me to at least stop in for a meal. "He'll be crushed if he knows you came and didn't say hi," she said. So I did. He opened the door with his usual gruff affection. "There she is. Thought I'd have to file a missing persons report." Dinner was casual. Homey. He made grilled salmon, and Jaya brought lemon bars. We sat outside on the patio, cicadas buzzing in the trees, the air thick and slow. They didn't mention my parents, and I didn't bring them up. After dessert, my uncle looked at me across the table and said, "You know, I think sometimes people mess up so slowly, they don't even notice it until the damage is done." I didn't reply. He wasn't making excuses. Just offering context. He went on. "But that doesn't mean the damage doesn't count." "It does. You've got every right to carry that weight however you want to." Jaya nodded beside him. "We've been learning that too." It was the first time I felt like someone was willing to meet me where I stood instead of asking me to come back to where they were. On the bus ride to Kansas City, I kept thinking about that patio conversation. About how strange and sad it is that healing often begins in places that aren't even the ones that hurt you. Sometimes it's the people on the periphery who show you what love would have looked like. I started writing again that night, in a notebook I always carried in my bag. Nothing structured. Just memories, impressions, moments that had been trapped under my skin for too long. I wrote about the silence after my mom's voicemail. About the softness in Jaya's voice when she said she was proud of me. About the way Alex's mom had folded my laundry without saying a word. I didn't write about forgiveness. Not yet. I wasn't sure I was there. But I wrote about the space between pain and peace, the slow, awkward place where you stop bleeding, even if the wound still stings. When I got to the conference, I shared one of my essays during a student showcase. It wasn't about my family directly. Not by name. But it was about abandonment, and belonging, and learning to choose yourself even when it feels like betrayal. Afterward, a woman in her 40s came up to me. She looked nervous, like she was holding back tears. "My daughter's about your age," she said. "We haven't spoken in a while. I think I made some mistakes." She trailed off, blinking quickly. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Sometimes the stories we tell don't fix anything. They don't reunite broken families or change stubborn minds. But they sit with someone long enough to shift a perspective. And sometimes that's enough to start something new. By the end of that summer, something had shifted in me. Not in a dramatic, movie-style way, no montage of self-discovery, no sudden peace. But I felt more grounded. More certain of who I was without needing the validation of people who had consistently failed to give it. When I returned to Chicago, I stopped forwarding my parents' emails to a separate folder. I didn't respond yet, but I didn't block them either. That was its own kind of statement: you're allowed to speak. I just don't have to listen right now. I poured myself into writing. I expanded my essay into a manuscript, a collection of personal stories about family, identity, emotional neglect, and the strange freedom of letting go. A professor helped me submit it to a small indie publisher. I expected nothing. Just the satisfaction of trying. Then, somehow, it got picked up. The editor said the work was searing and quiet all at once, and that she cried while reading it. The advance was small, but it was more than I'd ever been paid for writing. The real payoff was the platform. They wanted to feature me in a few Midwest book fairs. I said yes. The publisher launched a modest marketing campaign. I did interviews with literary blogs. A local paper in Chicago ran a feature with the headline, "Telling the Quiet Truth, a young author's journey out of the family that forgot her." That one made the rounds. And, as I later found out, it made its way back to Des Moines. About a month before the book release, my mom called again. I didn't answer. She left another voicemail, her voice tight, almost formal. "Hi, Mara. I saw. I read the article. We did see it. I guess I just wanted you to know we saw it." I saved the voicemail, but I didn't call back. Instead, I posted a short clip from a reading I did at the Hyde Park Lit Fest on Instagram. It was a moment from the manuscript where I talked about waiting outside the gym in my cap and gown. How I kept checking my phone like it could make people appear. The caption just said, "Sometimes the most important ceremony in your life is the one they never showed up for." It blew up. People shared it. Comment. Related. And that's when the real revenge began. Not the kind with screaming matches or confrontations. The better kind, the kind where you rise so quietly and completely that the people who tried to shrink you have to sit with the fact that they were wrong. So very wrong. I returned to Des Moines again, this time by invitation. The local library was hosting a regional author event. My book had landed on a Midwest Voices shortlist and was being picked up by school reading programs. My face was on a poster in the library entrance, just below a sign that read "Featured Guest, Mara Whitlow, Local Author." When I walked into the reading room, it was already half full. Familiar faces. Former classmates. Some old teachers. People who'd barely acknowledged me growing up, now holding copies of my book with sticky notes tucked inside. Even the mayor's office sent a rep to introduce me. "Born and raised right here in Des Moines," the woman said, smiling into the mic. "Mara's work is a powerful testament to the idea that sometimes, strength isn't loud. Sometimes, it's the voice that speaks after years of silence." I stepped up to the podium and read the first few pages of the chapter titled "Alone in the Gym." When I finished, the room was so still you could hear someone's bracelet clink against their chair. And in the back of the room, I saw them. My parents. My mother is in a dark blue dress, hands folded tight in her lap. My father next to her, wearing that strained, polite smile he used at PTA meetings. They clapped with everyone else, but slower. Hesitant. After the reading, there was a signing line. I greeted people, signed books, and posed for photos. When it finally died down, they approached me. I didn't say anything. My mom was the first to speak. "You've become someone incredible," she said softly. "We don't deserve to be here." I tilted my head. "You're right. You don't." She looked like she'd been slapped. My father opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "I'm not going to cause a scene," I said. "This moment? It's not about you. You had your chances." My mom nodded slowly. "I understand." "Good," I said. "Because I wrote that story without needing your approval. And I'm living it without needing your presence." I turned and walked away before they could respond. Not out of cruelty, but because the most satisfying revenge wasn't vengeance. It was freedom. Living well. Being seen by people who mattered. Becoming undeniable. 3 weeks later, the book went into a second printing. A teacher from Roosevelt emailed me asking if I'd Skype into her class to talk about creative nonfiction. Jaya called me just to scream when she saw my book listed on an independent bookstore's staff pick shelf. And I kept writing. About the power of being the one who walked away. About how some homes are made of bricks and walls, but others are made of people who show up when it counts. My family might never be what I needed it to be. But I became everything they never imagined I could be. And they had to watch. That was enough. That was more than enough.